Picture the dawn over the fjords of Denmark. The sea glimmers steel gray beneath the rising sun, and the sound of oars cuts across the still waters. Here begins the saga of Sweyn Forkbeard, c. 960-1014, a king as cunning as he was ruthless, whose ambitions would bring England to its knees and forge a dynasty that would shape northern Europe for generations. But Sweyn's story does not begin with him alone. It is part of a wider Viking storm, a great northern tide of kings, jarls, and sea lords, all locked in the endless struggle for land, power, and eternal fame. Sweyn was the son of Harold Bluetooth, c. 910-985, the king who famously made the Danes Christian. Though as always in those turbulent days, conversion was less about faith and politics. Harold raised the great gelling stones in Denmark, declaring his deeds for eternity. Yet beneath the carved runes of Christian crosses still lingered the old gods Odin's ravens and Thor's hammer, whispered in the minds of warriors. But Harold's rule was contested. His embrace of Christianity, his centralization of power, and his dealings with foreign rulers sparked unrest among the jarls. Into this fire was thrown young Sweyn. Some sagas suggest that Sweyn rebelled against his own father, driving Harold into exile, where he died in Pomerania. Whether true or embroidered by later chroniclers, it reveals something crucial. Sweyn Forkbeard was no obedient son. He was born to challenge and to rule. Sweyn was given his byname, Forkbeard, Old Norse, Sveiten Jagilski, for the way his beard split in two prongs, a symbol of his rugged warrior image. Chroniclers describe him as fierce and proud, a man with an unyielding will. But unlike many Viking warlords who lived only for raiding, Sweyn's ambition was grander. He did not merely want silver and slave, he wanted crowns. Sweyn knew that conquest required more than swords. It also required blood alliances. He married twice, weaving his dynasty into the heart of northern politics. First marriage. Świętosława of Poland, also known as Gunhild or Sigrid Storda in Scandinavian sources. Świętosława was the daughter of Mieszko I of Poland, one of the most powerful rulers of early medieval Europe. This alliance linked Denmark to the rising Piast dynasty of Poland. Through her, Sweyn fathered two sons who would shake the world, Harold II Harefoot, who would later rule England, Cnut the Great, c. 995-1035, the Viking who would conquer all of England and forge the North Sea Empire. Second marriage, possibly to Sigrid the Haughty, Sigrid Storda. Some sources claim Sweyn later wed the formidable Swedish Queen Sigrid, a woman of iron will, who had already spurned Olaf Tryggvason of Norway with the famous line, "I will never take a man who makes me abandon my faith." Whether Świętosława and Sigrid were one and the same, as some historians suggest, or separate women, the point remains. Sweyn tied his dynasty into both Poland and Sweden, giving him both legitimacy and allies across the Baltic. Thus, from the cradle, Sweyn's sons were heirs not just to Denmark, but to a broader northern empire. The saga of Sweyn Forkbeard cannot be told without his great rival, Olaf Tryggvason of Norway. Olaf was a fiery, impetuous king who rose from exile to seize Norway in 995. He was a Christian zealot, forcing conversions at sword point, smashing idols of Thor and Odin, and humiliating nobles who resisted. This earned him bitter enemies, and none more so than Sweyn. Their rivalry was both political and personal. Some sagas suggest that Olaf once married Sweyn's sister, Thyra, but treated her cruelly, further deepening the hatred between the two kings. The enmity reached its climax in 1000 CE at the Battle of Svolder, one of the greatest naval clashes in Viking history. Olaf's long ships, including the mighty Ormrund Lani, Wain and Serpent, faced the combined fleets of Sweyn Forkbeard, Olaf Skate Cunning of Sweden, and Eirik Hakanarsson, Jarl of Lade. Olaf fought like a berserker, wielding sword and spear as wave after wave of enemies boarded his ship. In the end, surrounded and betrayed, Olaf leapt overboard, vanishing into legend. Sweyn emerged triumphant. Norway was divided. Sweyn took parts for himself. Eirik Hakanarsson ruled as Sweyn's ally, and Olaf Tryggvason's legacy was extinguished for now. The Battle of Svolder made Sweyn the most powerful king in Scandinavia. With Norway under his shadow, Sweyn turned his gaze westward. For decades, Viking raiders had plagued England, but Sweyn sought more than plunder. He wanted the crown. England in the late 10th and early 11th century was under the troubled rule of Thellard II, the Unready. His epithet, from Old English unrid, poor counsel, tells the tale. He was indecisive, burdened by weak advisors, and unable to resist the Viking onslaught. Sweyn led devastating campaigns across England. In 1003, he launched raids in revenge after Thellard ordered the infamous St. Brice's Day massacre, where Danish settlers in England were slaughtered. One victim was Sweyn's sister, Gunhild. The fury of this insult ignited his determination to conquer. Between 1003 and 1013, his armies swept across the land, burning towns, seizing tribute, and forcing the English into submission. Finally, in 1013, Sweyn declared himself King of England. Thellard fled into exile in Normandy, and for a brief moment, Sweyn Forkbeard sat on the throne of one of Europe's richest kingdoms. But fate is often cruelest at the moment of triumph. On February 3, 1014, after just 5 weeks as King of England, Sweyn Forkbeard died suddenly at Gainsborough in Lincolnshire. Some chroniclers whispered it was a divine punishment for his desecrations of churches. Others claimed it was a stroke or illness. The conquest he had begun was left unfinished, but his sons would carry the torch. Harold Harefoot ruled briefly in England, 1035 to 1040. Cnut the Great, far surpassing his father, conquered England in 1016, ruled Denmark and Norway, and created the North Sea Empire, one of the greatest northern realms of the Middle Ages. Sweyn had planted the seed of empire, and through Cnut that seed flourished. Sweyn Forkbeard was the first Viking ever to rule all of England. Though his reign was short, it marked a turning point. No longer were the Vikings mere raiders, they were kings and empire builders. His alliances through marriage tied Denmark to Poland and Sweden. His victory at Svolder ended the reign of Olaf Tryggvason. His conquest of England set the stage for the rise of Cnut. Sweyn's saga is that of a man who embodied the Viking spirit, fierce in battle, cunning in politics, ruthless in ambition. A man whose forked beard became a symbol of defiance, whose family would dominate northern Europe for decades. And though his body lies in Gainsborough, far from the fjords of Denmark, his name remains etched in the annals of both Scandinavian sagas and English chronicles. Sweyn Forkbeard the Viking, who took a crown